Hey, welcome back. Marianne DeNovellis here with the Six Figure Mastermind, and we're going to be putting together your sales contracts. We've got some key things that you need to remember to include in there, so keep watching and stay tuned. All right, congratulations, you made the sale. But now what do? We need a contract, something to sign, seal, and deliver and make all the expectations clear all across the board. I want you to take some really good notes on this one. Pull out a piece of paper, wherever you're sitting, take some notes on this one because I'm going to give you several bullet points on what needs to be included in your contract to not only make it legal and binding, but to make a quality contract. There's a big difference between just saying, I will do this and you will pay me this, versus here's what I'm committing to and here's how I'm going to show up and what's my exit strategy, and all of those things completely thought through. And in order to make a contract that is really going to serve you really well and especially cover you in case anything happens, you're going to want to have the following. The first thing that you need in your contract is obviously it needs to be called a contract or a sales contract. That title needs to be on there. Something that you wouldn't normally think about. You think it'd be obvious, but oftentimes it gets forgotten. So you need to include in the title of your contract that it is, in fact, a contract. The second thing you need in a contract is every party involved needs to be on the contract. They need to be named in detail. So for example, if you're using a party that has a super long name and it condense it down to an abbreviation, you need to spell out that name and say hereafter referred to as, and put the abbreviation. All of those parties need to have their names, their phone numbers, their email addresses, and physical mailing addresses all within the contract. Now that could be in multiple places. It could be in the top in the address. It could be within the body of the contract. It could be at the bottom of the contract. I would recommend putting it in more than one place on your contract so that whenever you need to get a hold of someone, let's say there's something that you need to discuss about your contract or fulfillment or payment, that you have multiple ways of getting a hold of them. Every single manner that we use to communicate, you need to have on your contract. So again, that's full name, full legal name of the company, address, mailing address if that's different, phone number, and email. All of those need to be on the contract and the correct addresses. You've got to have everything up to date on your contract. The third thing that you're going to need in your contract is description. This is where contracts tend to get a little bit wordy, and we sometimes go into this legalese thing of the shalls and the we hereuntos and all of this fun stuff. Keep it simple. You're totally allowed to do that, but make a full description of exactly what it is that's going on. If you're offering a product or a service or a program, something that needs your contract, describe in full, A to Z, what your program is going to do. What value are you providing? What are you committing to do? How much time are you committing to put into it? What's your increments of time? For example, if you're in a coaching contract and you're an entrepreneur who's a coach, you're going to say, I'm meeting with you, for example, every 6 weeks from Tuesdays between 1 and 2 p.m. That needs to be on your contract. If you don't have a specific time or date or schedule, you can say we will be meeting once a month for at least an hour. You can give yourself as much flexibility as you want. The funny thing with contracts is you can put anything in them. As long as it's legal, moral, and ethical, you can put whatever you want into a contract. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could put, you have to bring me a Reuben sandwich every Tuesday at noon. You could put that in your contract. And if they sign on it, they'd have to do that. Don't be crazy. Don't be one of those guys. I'm not saying you should, but what I am saying is that whatever you need to put in your contract, it's legal, moral, and ethical, it's totally okay. You can do whatever you need to do in your contracts, okay? Just be cool about it. Here's also what you're going to do is any guarantees. The fourth thing that on your contract is any guarantees on your product or your service. Anything that you offer is a guarantee, and any stipulations if that guarantee is not met. Sometimes that's referred to as an exit strategy. You just need to make sure that your bases are covered as far as what you're promising to do and what happens if that promise does not get fulfilled on. You also need to include the price for whatever product or service that you're offering. That price needs to be spelled out not only in the full dollar amount, but also if you're making payments or you have a payment schedule, you need to make sure that you spell out verbatim how much the contract is being paid for on a regular basis and when those payments are due and the penalty if those payments are not. Again, Every contract has an exit strategy for every part of the contract, or a penalty, if you will. I don't like to use the word penalty, but really that's what it is. Every contract needs to tell you what exactly you're agreeing upon and basically what will happen if that agreement is not kept. So you've got to have your price and you've got to have your pricing schedule on the contract. It's part of the signature. Again, we talk about penalties. You need to have penalties for the buyer and the seller. Oftentimes when there's a contract, there's a duration of time in which the contract is fulfilled. So for example, if you have a home builder and they are a contractor, no pun intended, and they're contracting to do all of this for your home, they're putting the paint on the walls and they have the electrical guy come in and all of that's part of your contract. And let's say they decided to put on the contract that the home would be done 6 months to the day from the date the contract was signed. If that home is not built within that 6 month time frame, there's a penalty. There's either a discount on services or there's a whatever stipulation you want to put in as a penalty for that not being fulfilled. Now on the other side, someone is paying this contractor to build their home and maybe they're making monthly payments. Maybe they're late on one payment or they miss a payment. There needs to be a stipulation covering the contractor for whatever the seller or the buyer is not bringing to the table. So you're both in a contract making an agreement. I commit to do this, I commit to bring this value, and we're going to have a value exchange. If that value exchange is not according to what the stipulations of the contract says, you've got to have your bases covered as far as how you're going to work with that. The last thing you need on your contract is a subjection. The subjection is, I always include in my contract, subject to the laws of the state of, and then whatever state I'm doing the contract in. I always put that in there. Again, that's covering the basis. So if you're making a contract in Tennessee, always include in your contract, subject to the laws of the state of Tennessee. If you're in Virginia, same thing, subject to the laws of the state of Virginia. I always, always, always include that line in any of my contracts so that I am covered as far as the legal system goes. I want to make sure that all of my contracts and all of my stipulations are within the realms of what is technically legal. So I'm always saying subject to the laws that are within the state of Utah, for example. The state of Utah, for example, has a 3-day right of rescission. So if a 3-day right of rescission is enforced, that's well within the terms of the contract because I put that line in there because it's subject to the laws of the state. And then, of course, at the very end, you need to have signatures. Now, nowadays, e-signing is very, very popular. You can use Adobe or e-signature or any one of any other electronic signing documents. An e-signature is just as legal and valid as a physical signature. That's why we can sign for your credit cards on a signature tablet at the grocery store. Essentially, every time you do that, you're signing a contract because you click the box that I say, I accept the terms and condition of using this card. Every time you sign your name on a purchase, you're essentially signing a contract. So your digital signature is every bit as good as a physical signature. So you've basically got it covered A to Z. You've got all the parties involved. You've got all the stipulations of the contract penalties. You've got all the details of the value exchange. You've got your signatures. You've got covered under the state of whatever state you're in. You've got everyone there present and ready to sign at the same time, and everything is documented digitally. And do yourself a favor, print off a physical copy of your contract so you can store that on hand for whatever emergency you might need. Maybe your computer crashes or maybe some email gets lost. You've got a physical copy right there in your hands at all times. Contracts are very simple. They're not as complicated as everyone thinks. All you need to do is just make sure all your bases are covered and do yourself another favor of keeping a live, living copy, and by that I mean a digital editable copy right on your hard drive. So if you're selling the same product or service or program over and over and over again, you can go back to that document that's not signed by anybody. It's just your template contract and add or take away things that you're learning as you go. Keep that on hand and you're bound to be successful. Cool, you got through it. Congratulations, that was a lot of content. If you like what you're seeing, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow.